Hello, everybody. In this presentation, we're going to continue talking about demand curves. The last couple presentations, we were talking about how to derive demand curves. Today, we're going to be looking at what happens to demand curves if different factors change. So the first factor we're going to look at is what happens if the price of the good we're looking at changes. So in this example, I start at point A. So this is the demand curve for Big Macs, I believe. Yep. So the horizontal axis is quantity of Big Macs demanded, and the vertical axis is the price of Big Macs. So initially, Big Macs cost $4. And when Big Macs cost $4, I demand 10 of them. For some reason, the price of Big Macs goes up to $8. Because what's changing is the price of Big Macs, and the price of Big Macs is one of the things on the axis of this graph. So price of Big Macs is on the vertical axis of this graph. When the price of Big Macs change, that means we are going to slide along the demand curve to point B. When we slide along the demand curve to point B, we will be at a new place where at $8 per Big Mac, I'm only going to demand 5 of them. So again, it's because the thing that's changing is one of the variables on the axes that we slide along the demand curve. So let's see what happens. Oh, that was unfortunate. Hang on. Okay, we are going to continue. Sorry, I turned off the presentation. Okay, so this is a situation. This is a demand curve for concert tickets. So the quantity of tickets is on the horizontal axis, and the price of tickets is on the vertical axis. We start off at point A, and then the ticket vendor says, okay, so originally at point A, tickets cost $6, and at $6, I am willing to buy 7 tickets. So then, in this case, let's say that the ticket vendor says, okay, we're only going to sell a maximum of 3 tickets to each person. So then what happens is, now because the quantity of tickets is limited to 3, again, we are going to slide along the demand curve to B. So again, quantity is one of the variables on the axis. It's the horizontal axis. So if that for some reason changes, we are going to slide along the given demand curve. And so at $3, I'm willing to pay if I can only get 3 tickets, I'm willing to spend $14 a piece on them, and we'd be at that new point. So the takeaway here is that if the quantity that changes is one of the axis variables, then the change you're going to see is a slide along the given demand curve. Okay, so what happens if something that is not one of the axis variables changes? The suspense is killing me. Okay, so specifically, we have been saying all along that things like your income affect how much of a good you will demand. Also, things like the price of other related goods, potentially substitutes or complements. If those prices change, it could change how much of this good you demand. So how does that show up on a graph? Okay, so here is a graph of what happens when your income changes. So we start with the red demand curve. So initially we're at point A. The price of, did I say what good it is in here? Nope, we didn't name the good. So how about it will be Elvis posters. So the price of Elvis posters is not going to change. It's going to be $4 at all times. And at my original income level, I demanded 5 Elvis posters. So then what happens is I get a raise, so my income goes up. And what that does is now at any given price level, I'm going to demand more Elvis posters. So used to be that if the price was 5, I'd be here. Now, once my income goes up, I'm going to demand this much, this many Elvis posters. And at point A, once my income goes up, I will go to shift over to point B and demand 14 Elvis posters. So if you remember back when we were doing indifference curves and budget constraints, when your income goes up, that's a parallel shift outward of the budget constraint. And so what happens is you go from demanding this much of the good to this much, even though the price of the good hasn't changed. So you're going to get the demand curve will be a parallel shift outward, assuming that the good is normal. So if the income goes up, that means outward shift if it's a normal good. Remember, normal good means that when your income goes up, you demand more of it. So then I'm going to leave you a question here. What do you think might happen if your income goes up and the good is inferior? So we'll throw in a play pause question about that, and we'll move on to the next change. Okay, so this graph is looking at what happens when the price of a related good changes. We're going to start with the case of a substitute. So here we start at good A, or sorry, at point A. The price of the good we're looking at is $6. So what happens is, so let's say that the demand we're looking at, the good we're looking at is, let's just go with Diet Coke. Okay, so at $6, I demand 8 Diet Cokes. So then what happens in this example is, let's say the price of Diet Pepsi goes down. So a substitute for Diet Coke got cheaper. So what that means is that my demand for Diet Coke will decrease. I mean, not me personally, I'm very loyal to my brand, but in general, this could happen. So what happens is that when the price of a substitute goes down, your demand for this good will decrease. So we're going to get a shift to the left. So if a substitute gets cheaper, demand curve shifts left. Because at any given price of Diet Coke, I'm going to demand less of it because I can get Diet Pepsi for cheaper. So let's just do a couple other examples. So we've got, we've just done the example where the price of a substitute falls. Now let's think about what would happen if the price of a substitute increased. So what would happen if Diet Pepsi got more expensive? Well, so then what would happen is that people who prefer Diet Pepsi, don't know who they are, they would be like, oh, Diet Pepsi got more expensive, maybe I'll buy Diet Coke instead. And so what would happen is the demand curve would shift to the right, and you might see something like this. Okay, so if price of a substitute goes up, your demand's going to increase and you're going to shift right. So now let's imagine what would happen if two goods were complements. So I'll put in a play pause question. What do you think would happen if we start at point A, so we're back to point A. What do you think would happen if the price of a complement goes up? So take a second, think about that. So remember, a complement is a good that you usually consume together with Diet Coke. So put in your answer. So what would happen is, so we start here at A. If the price of a complement goes up, then what's going to happen is the price. So if the price of that complement goes up, I'm going to consume less of that complement. But because I usually consume my Diet Coke with that good, my demand for Diet Coke is also going to fall. So you would get a shift rightward. Because, again, I'm going to be consuming less of that complement, but since I always drink my Diet Coke with that good, if I consume less of that good, I'm also going to consume less Diet Coke. So you get another left shift. And so lastly, you can imagine the last combination is if the price of a complement goes down. So if the price of a complementary good gets cheaper, that means I'm going to consume more of it. But because I always consume Diet Coke with that complement, I'm going to end up consuming more Diet Coke as well. So we're going to get another rightward shift. So probably make a little table. So in this table, if the price of a substitute goes up, then demand is going to shift to the left. So demand goes down. If the price of a substitute, oh, my bad, not true. If the price of a substitute goes up, then I'm going to demand more of this good. So that's the case where the price of Diet Pepsi went up, I'm going to demand more Diet Coke. If the price of the substitute goes down, my demand curve is going to shift to the left. I'm going to demand less. If the price of Diet Pepsi goes down, I'm going to buy more Diet Pepsi and less Diet Coke. And then these arrows will be reversed. For complements, if the price of a complement goes up, that means I'm going to consume less of the good whose price went up and also less Diet Coke. And then that's going to be the demand shift. We're going to get a rightward demand shift if the price of a complement goes down. Okay. We're going to look, I think it's more mathematical ways of thinking about this. I'm actually going to stop this presentation here and start the mathematical explanation in the next video, because it's going to take more than the minute and a half that I have left here. Okay, so we'll pick up here.